There are some places where the past feels closer than it should. Places where the streets become quiet after dark. Where familiar roads feel different at night. Where every shadow seems to carry a story. And in almost every town, there is one story that people remember. A story that begins with, "Have you heard about Sarah Simpson?" According to local folklore, Sarah Simpson was a young woman connected to Cranebrook in Sydney's western suburbs, a woman whose story has been told in different ways for decades. Some say she disappeared. Some say she died under tragic circumstances. Some versions claim she suffered a terrible crime before her death, and others say her spirit remains behind. Angry, restless, unable to move on. And some people claim Sarah is a warning. Others say she is a ghost. And some believe the entire story is nothing more than a legend that grew larger every time it was told. But that raises the biggest question. How does a person become a ghost story? How does a name become folklore? And what happens when the line between history and imagination disappears? Tonight we investigate the Sarah Simpson legend. The girl, the ghost, and the story that refuses to disappear. Before we investigate the story, we need to understand something important. There is not one Sarah Simpson legend, there are multiple versions. Like many urban legends, the details change depending on who's telling the story. One person may have heard one version from a friend, someone else may have heard a darker version from a local resident, and over time, those versions blend together. The result is a story that feels familiar, but impossible to completely verify. The most common elements are a young woman named Sarah Simpson, a connection to Cranebrook, a tragic event, and a haunting. But beyond those details, the story becomes much less certain. And this is actually one of the most fascinating things about folklore. A documented crime has evidence, reports, records, witnesses, a timeline. A legend works differently. It survives through memory, through repetition, through people saying, "I heard this happened," or "My friend knew someone who saw something." This story does not need to be proven to survive. It only needs to be remembered. To understand why a story like Sarah Simpson could take hold, we first need to understand the place where the legend lives. Cranebrook is located in Sydney's western suburbs near Penrith. Today, it is a suburban community. But for much of its history, the area was shaped by something that appears frequently in Australian folklore: the boundary between civilization and wilderness. Australia has always been a country where landscape creates stories. The bush has inspired countless legends, not just because of its beauty, but because it can also feel unknown. A road surrounded by trees, a place where phone reception disappears, a location where after sunset everything sounds different. For generations, Australians have attached stories to these places. Ghost stories, warning stories, stories about people who entered the bush and never returned. Cranebrook sits in an interesting position. It is suburban, but it is also close to a large area of open land and bush. That contrast creates the perfect environment for folklore. During the day, a place can feel ordinary. At night, the same location can quickly feel completely different. And this transformation is often where legends begin. The Sarah Simpson legend belongs to a much larger tradition. Australia has always been fascinated by ghost stories, from haunted theatres to old prisons to lonely country roads. Almost every region has its own supernatural tale. The details change, the pattern remains the same. A tragedy occurs. A location becomes associated with it. And eventually, people begin telling stories. The most powerful ghost stories are usually not about ghosts. They are about people. Someone who disappeared. Someone who suffered. Someone whose story feels unfinished. And that is exactly what makes the Sarah Simpson legend so interesting. Because whether the story is true, exaggerated, or completely fictional, the idea behind it is very real. People remember tragedy, and sometimes they turn memories into myths. But the real mystery begins when we start to look at different versions of Sarah Simpson herself. Because depending on who tells the story, Sarah is not always the same person. Sometimes she is a victim. Sometimes she is a ghost. And sometimes she becomes something much darker. Every legend has a beginning, but sometimes the beginning isn't the hardest part to find. With Sarah Simpson, there is no single story. Instead, there are layers, different versions, different explanations, different endings. And each version tells us something about the people who continue to share it. The first version is the simplest. A young woman who disappeared. The second is darker. A victim of a terrible crime whose story was never resolved. And the third transforms Sarah from a person into something supernatural. A spirit driven by anger and revenge. Tonight we examine each version. Not as confirmed history, but as the evolving folklore that created the legend. The earliest and most common form of the story is also the most familiar. The missing girl. According to this version of the legend, Sarah Simpson was a young woman whose life ended in mystery. The details are often unclear. Some versions suggest she disappeared. Others suggest something happened to her and the truth was never discovered. But the central theme remains. Sarah vanished, and nobody knows why. This type of story appears again and again throughout folklore. A person disappears, a community searches for answers. Rumours begin, questions replace facts, and eventually, the person becomes part of a local memory. The missing person becomes more than an individual. They become a story. The power of the missing girl version comes from one thing: uncertainty. If a person is found, the story ends. If there is a clear explanation, the mystery disappears. But when there are no answers, people naturally try to fill the gaps. And those gaps are where legends grow. Where did Sarah go? What happened to her? Was someone responsible? Was she ever found? These questions are the foundation of the legend. But as the story was passed down, another version appeared, and this version changed everything. The second version of Sarah Simpson's legend is much darker. According to some retellings, Sarah was not simply missing. The story claims that she suffered a violent attack before her death. Some versions specifically include allegations of sexual assault. Again, this is part of the folklore surrounding the legend and is not supported by publicly verified records. But within the story itself, this detail becomes the explanation for the haunting. The idea is simple. Sarah experienced something so traumatic, so unjust, that her spirit could not rest. Her death was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of her legend. This is one of the oldest patterns in ghost folklore. The spirit of a person is wronged. Someone whose suffering was never acknowledged, someone whose story was never completed. Across cultures, these spirits often return because something remains unresolved. A crime, a betrayal, an injustice, and the ghost becomes a symbol of something unfinished. In this version of Sarah Simpson's story, she is not remembered because she disappeared. She is remembered because people believe something terrible happened to her. Her tragedy becomes the reason she remains. This is the point where the Sarah Simpson legend changes. She stops being simply a person in a story. She becomes a supernatural figure. A ghost, a presence, a warning. And this transformation happens quickly in folklore. A real person, or a person believed to be real, becomes something symbolic. Their story changes depending on what the community needs it to represent. A missing girl represents uncertainty. A victim represents injustice, but a ghost represents something else. The idea that some events are too powerful to simply disappear, that some pain remains, that some stories refuse to end. The darkest version of Sarah Simpson's legend is the story of an angry spirit. According to this version, Sarah is not a lost soul searching for answers. She is a spirit filled with anger, a ghost carrying a memory of what supposedly happened to her. Some retellings claim that Sarah's anger is directed specifically towards men. The explanation given within the folklore is that the person or people responsible for her suffering were male. Therefore, her spirit supposedly became hostile towards men after death. This is a common theme in supernatural storytelling. The vengeful female ghost, a woman who suffered injustice, a woman whose anger continues beyond death. Examples of this type of legend exist around the world. The message is always similar. Something terrible happened. Someone was wronged, and the world never made it right. As the Sarah Simpson story developed, sightings became part of the folklore. These accounts are not documented evidence. They are the kind of stories passed between people. The story usually follows familiar patterns. A person driving late at night, a quiet road, a figure appearing unexpectedly, a young woman standing alone. Some versions describe Sarah appearing in roads. Others describe a woman who seems to need help. A driver approaches. They look away for a moment, and when they look back, she is gone. This is one of the oldest ghost story structures in existence. The mysterious stranger, the impossible disappearance, the encounter that leaves the witness questioning reality. So why does Sarah Simpson have so many different stories? Because folklore evolves. A story changes with each generation. A teenager hearing a legend today may focus on the scary parts. A local resident may focus on the tragedy. Someone else may remember only the warning. The same name, different meanings. The missing girl version creates mystery. The victim version creates sympathy. The vengeful ghost version creates fear. Together they form the complete Sarah Simpson legend. A story that combines every element needed for a lasting piece of folklore. A person, a tragedy, a mystery, and something unexplained. But there is still one question. Where did Sarah Simpson come from? Was there a real person behind the legend? Was there an event that inspired the story? Or did the story itself create Sarah? This is where the investigation becomes more interesting. Because Sarah Simpson is not only an Australian legend built around a mysterious woman, across the country, similar stories have appeared. Women on lonely roads, ghosts connected to tragedy, lost souls searching for justice. And these stories may reveal why legends like Sarah Simpson survive. Because sometimes, the most interesting mystery is not whether ghosts exist, it is why we created the ghost in the first place. Throughout this investigation, one question has lingered in the background. Who was Sarah Simpson? Was she simply a character created by folklore? A name attached to an old ghost story? Or was there a real woman whose life became tangled in legend? The answer is more complicated than you might expect. Because history tells us there really was a woman named Sarah Simpson, but she wasn't born with that name. She was born Sarah Marshall in England during the late 18th century. Like thousands of others during Britain's harsh penal era, Sarah found herself on the wrong side of the law. Convicted of stealing clothing of relatively small value, she was sentenced to transportation to New South Wales. In 1818, she arrived in the colony aboard a convict transport, beginning a new life on the opposite side of the world. For many convicts, transportation meant the end of one life and the beginning of another. Sarah was no exception. After serving her sentence, she married a man named John Simpson. For that moment on, Sarah Marshall became Sarah Simpson. The couple settled in the Castlereagh district near present-day Penrith, not far from what eventually would become Cranebrook. By all surviving historical accounts, Sarah built a new life. She was no longer simply a convict. She was a wife, a member of a growing colonial community. When Sarah died in 1838, she was buried in the old cemetery at Castlereagh. Nearly 2 centuries later, her headstone still stands. A quiet reminder she was a real person who lived through one of Australia's earliest colonial periods. But this is where history ends and legend begins. Over the years, stories began to circulate about Sarah's grave. Some claimed strange things happened near the cemetery after dark. Others spoke of uneasy feelings in the area. As with so many old cemeteries, ghost stories slowly become attached to the place. Eventually, another story began to circulate, a darker story. One claiming Sarah had been murdered, that her spirit couldn't rest, that she wandered the area searching for justice. But when historians searched for evidence, they found none. There are no known contemporary records confirming that Sarah Simpson was murdered. No surviving court records, no newspaper reports describing such a crime, no official investigation supporting the tale. The murder story appears to have emerged much later through local folklore. After the years passed, the legend continued to grow. And as the years passed, the legend continued to grow. So what happened? One possibility is that the real Sarah Simpson became connected to an existing ghost story. Another is that stories surrounding her grave gradually evolved until people accepted them as historical fact. Or perhaps several different local legends merged together over generations. A haunted cemetery, a lonely road, a mysterious woman, one name, many stories. This kind of blending is surprisingly common in folklore. Real people often become the centre of legends they never could have imagined. A single historical life becomes the foundation for countless retellings, each adding new details, new mysteries and new endings. And by the time those stories reach us, it can almost be impossible to separate history from imagination. So, perhaps that's a true lesson hidden inside every urban legend. Ghosts don't always begin with the supernatural. Sometimes they begin with a real person, a real life, a real name. Then, little by little, memory becomes myth, history becomes folklore, and an ordinary woman becomes immortal. Not because anyone proved she haunted the living, but because people never stopped telling her story. Whether you believe there is something waiting, one thing is certain, Sarah Simpson was real. By 1828, records show John was working as a tailor and the family was living on a small 5-acre farm. Sarah's life was not a mystery. She was a real person who lived, raised children, and became part of the history of the area. But in 1838, Sarah's life came to an end. She became seriously ill with influenza. An inquest held into her death, and the newspaper, Commercial Journal and Advisor, reported on the 26th of December, 1838, that Sarah Simpson had died after an illness lasting 11 days. The official verdict was, died by visitation of God, a phrase commonly used at the time to describe a natural death. There was no record of a murder, no documented crime, no evidence that Sarah died under any mysterious circumstances. And yet, somewhere between history and memory, the story changed. The woman who lived a real life became a character in the legend. the mother of 8, became a ghost. The record of her death became replaced by rumours of tragedy. And the historical Sarah Simpson became surrounded by stories that grew darker with every telling. You've been listening to Criminology Files. Producing these deep dives takes significant time and research. If you find value in our work, please take a moment to subscribe and leave us a review. For case updates and behind-the-scene content, follow us on Instagram at Criminology Files. We'll see you next week. Good night.